Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Story Hour. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. And today I'm going to read you Dr. Seuss's The Seven Lady Godivas, The True Facts Concerning History's Barest Family. This was originally published in 1939 and reissued in 1967. Forward. History has treated no name so shabbily as it has the name Godiva. Today, Lady Godiva brings to mind a shameful picture, a big, blonde nude trotting around the house on a horse. In the background of this picture, there is always Peeping Tom, an illicit snooper with questionable intentions. The author feels that this time has come to speak. There was not one. There were 7 Lady Godivas, and their nakedness actually was not a thing of shame. So far as Peeping Tom is concerned, he never really peeped. Peeping was merely the old family name, and Tom and his 6 brothers bore it with pride. A beautiful story of love, honor, and scientific achievement has too long been gathering dust in the archives. Dr. Seuss, Coventry, 1939. Old Lord Godiva. On the 15th of May, in the year 1066, Lord Godiva, Earl of all Coventry, summoned his daughters to appear before him in the great North Hall of the Castle Godiva. For a long, silent moment, he regarded them proudly, for the 7 daughters of Lord Godiva had brains. Nowhere, he thought with satisfaction, could there be a group of young ladies that wasted less time upon frivol and froth. No fluffy duff primping, no feather, no fuss. They were simply themselves and chose not to discuss it. Girls, announced Lord Godiva, today I leave for the Battle of Hastings, and, he added calmly, I'm going by horseback. Horseback? The sisters nervously looked from one to another. In that day in England, the horse was not taken lightly. True, Lord Godiva had been experimenting with these animals for years, but the horse remained a mystery, unbroken in spirit, a contrary beast, full of wiles and surprises. Come, chided Lord Godiva, rattling his spurs. Don't be so old-fashioned. This is 1066. Definitely, I shall attend the battle on horseback. Lord Godiva had spoken. His metal feet clanked as he led his daughters to the courtyard. Their bare feet followed, cold on the cobbles. Waiting and saddled stood Nathan, his warhorse. From the eye holes in his hoodgear, he watched the group approaching. Nice horse, smiled Lord Godiva, holding out a lump of sugar. Nathan ignored it. He looked sullen and foreboding. Lord Godiva put the sugar back in the pocket of his armor. He climbed into the saddle and aimed for the drawbridge. Nathan started off in a sidewise sort of trot. Good luck, shouted the girls, waving their handkerchiefs. To victory, shouted Lord Godiva, brandishing his broadsword. But everyone must have shouted too loud. Nathan reared. His front knees dipped low, and his hind knees flew high, and he pitched Lord Godiva, Earl of Coventry, spurs over breastplate, off his helm. By the time his daughters reached him, the old warrior was dead. Like any normal daughters, the Godiva sisters wept. Then they stiffened their shoulders and faced the facts. Their father was gone, destroyed by a horse. The girls were left with a grim obligation. Horses must be studied and charted, made safe for posterity. 7 hands clasped over Lord Godiva's remains. 7 tongues spoke. 7 pledges were uttered. I swear, swore each, that I shall not wed until I have brought to the light of this world some new and worthy horse truth, of benefit to man. It was an oath of heroic proportions. How long this horse truth quest might take was something no Godiva knew, but each one knew she was sad and sick at heart, for each one was in love, each one betrothed. That night, when the 7 peeping brothers came to court their ladies, all of the Castle Godiva doors were bolted. Nailed to every door was a copy of the oath. Very sadly, Peeping Tom, Peeping Dick, Peeping Harry, Peeping Jack, Peeping Drexel, Peeping Sylvester, and Peeping Freglinghuisen each dropped his bouquet into the moat. They all went home to wait. Teeny Godiva. The next morning, Hedwig awoke in the chill of the dawn. I am the eldest, she thought, as she brushed her teeth. I must manage these oaths in a systematic way. She cut sheets of parchment and stitched them together. She bound them with care in a cover of rawhide. To the top of this volume she hitched a bronze chain. Then she knocked at her sister's doors. Follow me, said Hedwig. Just that and nothing more. 6 solemn Godivas followed Hedwig to the stables. Hedwig hung the volume just outside the stable door. Then she showed them the contents, exactly 7 pages, and each one a blank. Somewhere there are horse truths, Hedwig said briefly. Each one of us must find one and inscribe it on her page. An oath has been sworn. That oath shall be kept. So long as your page remains empty of a horse truth, so shall your life remain empty of love. A terrible silence filled the stable courtyard. The mind of each Godiva was far away with her peeping. Hedwig stamped her foot. Enough of this wishy-washy schoolgirl mooning. Too hoarse, she shouted and plunged into the barn. A clatter of hoofbeats rang through the yard. Over the drawbridge they made for the fields, through the fens and the bracken, through the thistle and gorse, through moorland and marshland. The great quest was on. But teeny Godiva was not with the others. Left behind, left alone, left unnoticed. Teeny was too fat for any horse to carry. She sat down on a small pile of oats and wept. Her prospects added up badly indeed. No horse truth. No horse truth, no peeping. No peeping, no nothing. By and by, the oats became very uncomfortable. Teeny got up and went into the stable. Dejected, she wandered past stall after stall, out in the sunlight with her sisters. Out in the sunlight, her sisters were trotting, galloping, cantering, earning their love right. Here it was hot, and the horses dozed drearily. No cooperation, she sighed, as she trudged down the aisles. At Teeny's elbow, a lazy mare yawned. An enormous crude yawned, uncouth and ill-mannered. Teeny stalked on. Then she sensed something strange, and she stopped and looked back. The yawn, to her amazement, was still going on. Wider and wider, the beast's jaws stretched open. The yawn of all yawns, it blossomed. It bloomed from gap stage to gape stage, from gape stage to guap. At last, it reached its zenith and froze there, ajar. Teeny had never seen anything like it. I say, puzzled Teeny, maybe this isn't a yawn after all. The horse almost seemed to be inviting inspection. She stepped up to the mare. It stood still and obliging. She stepped up quite close, and she peered down its windpipe. When her sisters returned to the castle for lunch, they found Teeny in bed. From the crown of her head to the scruff of her neck, she was swathed deep in bandages, ointment and lint. "Nose gone," she said simply. "Teeny, poor Teeny," gasped her horrified sisters. Poor Teeny nothing. A radiant smile filtered up through the gauze. "You know that mare Uncle Ethelbert gave us last Christmas? With the help of the darling, I've filled my page." "A horse truth?" "A great one," said Teeny. "Don't ever look a gift horse in the mouth." In spite of the fact she was in no shape for kissing, Teeny Godiva married Peeping Tom that very night. Dorcas J. Godiva. In their bachelor household next morning, the Peepings were in high, hopeful spirits. A horse truth had been consummated on the very first day. "At this rate," rejoiced the brothers, "we'll all be married within the week." And at breakfast in the castle, Arabella, Mitzi, Lulu, Gussie, and Hedwig Godiva simply bubbled with cheer. The horse truth quest was going to be very easy. But Dorcas J. Godiva sat cool and unemotional. "It was a fluke, girls," she declared. "Teeny was just plain lucky. And if you're planning to loaf around the barns and let the horses do the thinking, I warn you, girls, right here and now, you'll never win your peepings. Research, believe me, is our one and only answer." "What's research?" Lulu puzzled, looking up from her herring. "Research," explained Dorca, "is the concentrated examination and correlation of the multitudinous phenomena coexistent in some specific field of activity. For my field, I have selected the study of horse-drawn vehicular transportation." Her sisters were not interested. Leaving them to loll and lounge in the stables, waiting for horse truths to drop in their laps, the analytical Godiva plunged into her research. In buggies and trumbles, in sulkies and shays, she rumbled through the highways and byways of Coventry, each day a different vehicle, each day the selfsame horse, and she watched his very action with a sharp and eager eye. But Thidwick, her horse, was a hard nut to crack. Stolid and placid, he pulled without emotion. His truths, if he had such, he kept to himself. "My wagons," thought Dorca, "must be made more provoking." Thidwick was smug, and he needed a jolt. So she rigged up a gig called the Wagon Superior. She constructed the wagon part purposely low, so that every fourth step, when his hind quarters rose, the boards slapped a rhythmic tattoo on his rump. Dorca was right. Thidwick's smugness was visibly shaken. In his eyes, she had detected a flicker of protest. She determined to pique him a little bit more. she rigged up a gig she called Wagon Inferior. Thidwig objected with ill humor and scorn. He had just about become accustomed to the wagon on top, and now the wretched woman had slung one down below his knees, so he had to trot wide in a disgraceful, undignified, bow-legged gait. His mood at the end of the day was just foul. Dorka was elated. In the smoldering depths of his mounting distemper, something was brewing, and it might be a horse truth, so she went a step further. This gig she rigged up she called Wagon Anterior. Never from a horse's point of view had a vehicle been constructed with less consideration. The whole craziness was backside, too. Giddy up, called Dorka, as offensively as possible. That giddy up for Thidwig was the very last straw. He saw red. He saw orange. He saw green, blue, and violet. Something in Thidwig virtually exploded. In the greatest horse and tree conflict that Coventry has ever known, Dorka J. Godiva discovered horse truth number 2. Don't, was its substance. Put the cart before the horse. Her wedding, however, was postponed for some time. It took more than 5 months to remove enough splinters to make the Lady of Research reasonably safe for Peeping Dick. Arabella Godiva. If ever a horse had reason to take to drink, it was Brutus. Arabella was wearing the poor devil down. So anxious was she to wed Peeping Harry that even while she slept, she worked the horse like mad. Nightly, she would sleepwalk down to the stables, and all night she would sleep trot over the hills. Brutus, of course, cracked under the strain. Somehow, he had learned that the fermented mash at the bottom of the silo had a soothing, consoling effect upon troubles. So whenever he got the chance, he'd tip hoofs stealthily around to the silo and indulge himself in a little quiet lapping. In no time at all, Brutus had degenerated into a drunken bum. Look at him, cried Arabella one morning. Brutus was suffering the most extravagant hangover ever experienced by man or by beast. He lay sprawled on his rumpled straw, his eyes bloodshot, his nostrils aquiver. His addled head swam, devoid of all horse sense. As a colleague in science, he was no help at all. He's a drunk, said Arabella, and I want another horse. But Hedwig spoke up sharply. Arabella, I've known Brutus since he was a colt, so high. What Brutus is today, you yourself have made him. You'll stick to him through thick and through thin. Come along, girls. Arabella's sister stalked out of the barn. Arabella frowned down at old besotted Brutus. Through this dissipated hulk lay her only road to freedom. Brutus, she realized, would have to be reformed. Oh, for goodness sake, she snapped. Make a horse of yourself. She trudged at his halter. Slowly, painfully, he staggered to his feet. He swayed there, weaving on 4 legs of rubber. Through the open window, he caught a glimpse of the silo. His murky eyes brightened. Oh, no, you don't, shouted Arabella, and she dragged the poor creature straight out to the pump. Pump stuff, shuddered Brutus. I'll die before I touch it. He did. Arabella phrased her horse truth in the oath book very neatly. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Then, underneath, she scribbled in a big, conceited scrawl, by the time you old maids read this, I'll be Mrs. Peeping Harry. Mitzi Godiva. Mitzi, my sweet, wrote able-bodied seaman Peeping Jack from his perch in the crow's nest of the bouncing Queen Mauve, playing the trade routes of Ultima Thule. It's 7 years now. How about that horse truth? Your true love, Peeping Jack. He sealed the letter with a kiss and posted it the next week in the port of Brunaboyne. From Brunaboyne to Quain Celine, to Brenniglag, to Thwilonthine, by sea skiff post and ox-drawn dray, the love note came to Coventry. It reached Mitzi in the stable on Midsummer's Day, that dreadfully hot August of 1073. As she read the brisk, fresh words, Mitzi was transported. The stables, the horses, all drifted away. She heard the shrill pipe of seagulls, felt the tang of salt spray, the surge of mighty rollers roared in her ears. She thought of lobsters and clams. Mitzi Godiva was a true sailor's sweetheart. The vision faded. Once more to her nostrils came the smell of mildewed straw. Mitzi Godiva was back in the barn. Horses, stupid, hay-munching beasts of dry land. If only they were seahorses. That would be different. Seahorses, mused Mitzi. A glorious idea. I shall go at the horse from a nautical angle. In a giddy frenzy of excitement, she plunged into the problems of equestrian aquatics. She swam horses across ponds, and she swam them in harbors. She dived them from chalk cliffs, and she fed them on seaweed. When her horses had become thoroughly at home in the water, Mitzi was ready for her great experiment. She designed and constructed a horse-propelled rowboat, and she named it the Peeping Jack in honor of her sweetheart. It was a beautiful thing, far ahead of its time, and generally speaking, it worked like a charm. It was not the lack of sea horsepower that made the craft a failure. It was the hammer, hammer, hammer on the hard oak treads. When every voyage was halfway through, the horse became down with hoof burn. The Peeping Jack was a one-way cruiser. Mitzi sank it and faced the whole problem anew. One blustery day in the following March, Mitzi slipped moorings and headed up the river in the Peeping Jack too. Mitzi at the tiller, Clover on the treadmill, and Dapples, the spare mare, perched high in the poop. Against a swift swirling current, Clover pushed on. In 3 hours, she clocked off a good 13 knots. Then she stopped. It was hoof burn. Dapples, commanded Mitzi, smiling and confident. Take your trick on the treadmill, climb down, and go forward. It was a wonderful scheme, and it ought to have worked. And it would have, if Dapples had followed Mitzi's instructions. But instead of passing sideways according to plan, Dapples attempted to go over Clover. A most disastrous piece of horseplay ensued. The wreckage of the Peeping Jack 2 was swept down the river. No one ever saw what happened to the horses. but her sisters saw Mitzi as she bounced down the rapids, clinging to some flotsam, headed hell-bent for sea. "Here's one for the book," her voice came back in anguish. "Never change horses in the middle of the stream." Several days later, she was picked up off Gunsery, oddly enough, by the bouncing Queen Mauve. And the sailor who saved her was good Peeping Jack. And they were married at sea by the captain. Lulu Godiva. On the 16th of April, 1078, Lulu Godiva was kicked by her horse, fairly and squarely, smack in the hayloft. In the hay, to her amazement, she found Peeping Drexel's diamond stick pin. He had lost it there, a trysting on a previous occasion. Thus Lulu discovered that horses are lucky. Lulu Godiva made a beeline for the oath book. She jotted down her horse truth and left the place forever. Gussie Godiva. The sisters Godiva had dwindled to 2. 10 winters had passed since Lulu had wed Drexel. Gussie and Hedwig were still deep in toil, fruitlessly groping for truths in the stables. Hedwig Godiva, placid and hopeful, faced each day with new patience and faith. But Gussie took to thinking too much about love. Repressed, she smoldered with passions galore. Each night, she dreamed dreams unbecoming of a maiden. Awaking in anguish, she would light a taper and brood the night through, staring at the portrait of Peeping Sylvester. "Come to me, loved one," his likeness would whisper. "Come to me, sweet, and the hell with your oath." "Dear handsome," she would sigh, "if only I dared." In 1091, just 3 nights before Michaelmas, Gussie gave in to her turbulent urge. She tore up her bedclothes to make an escape rope and lowered herself furtively from the high turret window. It was the night of Peeping Sylvester's birthday. Oath or no oath, she was going to surprise him. As it worked out, however, she surprised only Hedwig, who was a very light sleeper. "You climb," snapped Hedwig, "straight back up those bedsheets, and from now on, young lady, you'll be watched every minute." More frustrated than ever, poor Gussie climbed back. To elude the sharp eye of Hedwig, she realized, was impossible. There were no 2 ways about it. She would have to find a horse truth. She cudgeled her brains as she never had before. Her mind galloped wild along the most amazing thought lanes. By dawn, she had her horse truth. A strange one, perhaps, but entirely legitimate. Hedwig, spying from a wagon, saw Gussie approaching. Eyes ablaze, she swept on toward the stables. She clutched a mysterious bundle tight to her breast. Hair streaming behind her, Gussie vanished inside. The ancient barn door shut behind her with a slam. For a moment, breathless silence. Hedwig strained hard to hear. Through the walls came the sudden sounds of commotion, the crinkle and crackle of wrapping paper ripping, the uneasy scuffle of a score of nervous hoofs, a splashing of liquids, a terrified whinny. The door of the stable burst wide open. Out into the world hurtled Gussie Godiva, clinging to the back of a screaming mad nag, painted forelock to fetlock in a dizzy blue-green. That, she was shrinking, is my contribution. That is a horse of another color. As she streaked down the road like a lunatic comet, the giddiest Godiva broke into song. The staid hills of Coventry blushed as they heard her, bawdy and raucous and badly off-key. Hi diddle dester, ho diddle dum, peeping Sylvester, here I come. Hedwig Godiva. Neither Hedwig nor peeping Frelinghuysen was getting any younger. At 70, he had lost his job teaching harp at the country day school. When his fingers had stiffened, the school board let him go. Now I can spend my whole time, he wrote Hedwig, making plans for our marriage. Every warm day, the faithful old lover would pack up his basket and trudge with his dog to the top of the hill. There he would lie all day in the sunshine, gazing far away at the Castle Godiva. Its turrets still rose high, but no longer quite so proudly. Here and there, a crumbling battlement had fallen into the moat. The bell in the watchtower was muted with fungus. Everywhere grew blackthorn, sourgrass, and mink. The Castle Godiva was going to pot. With her bed and her bureau, Hedwig had long ago moved into the barn. Each day her situation was growing more critical. Time had began taking its toll in the stables. On December 31st, 11:05, she was down to her very last horse, Parsifal, and the poor antique gelding was at death's door with the grip. Yet without frenzy, without panic, Hedwig attended the failing steed's needs, dosing him hourly with bowls of hot hippogras, bundling him on the half-hour and newly warmed straw. As the old year was dying, Parsifal seemed just a little stronger. Hedwig, for the tonic effect it might have on its spirits, got out her horn and blew the new year in. It was not just a blast that she blew, but a prayer. The hopes of a lifetime went into that horn. And something within Parsifal responded to the call. Hedwig finally went to bed smiling. She had pulled him through his crisis. Parsifal would live. He did live, but Hedwig never saw him again. While she lay deep in the sleep of exhaustion, horse thieves stealthily broke in. An hour before dawn, Hedwig woke with a start. Parsifal's box stall was empty. Her last horse was gone. Well, any other woman would have dissolved into tears. But Hedwig Godiva was not that kind. From the depths of an impossible situation, she rose to pluck a hoarse truth out of thin air. "Don't," she exclaimed as she went out and did it. "Lock the barn door after the horse has been stolen." The stars over Coventry winked as they watched her. With her age-mellowed bridal veil crammed in a satchel, she plunged, humming, through the snowdrifts to the cottage of her ever-patient peeping. The end. I hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed reading it. Have a beautiful day. I love you all. Bye.